Ready when you are. Are we filming?
Oh yeah, we're filming.
Cool.
Ready?
You ready to go?
All right.
Let's do it.
How you doing? I'm here today with these two amazing gentlemen, apparently. Well, one I know for sure is amazing. Brian Michelino, my coach. And then we've got Anton and Xavier, who I've heard many, many good things about from this man right here.
Yeah, one of the main reasons Anton's on right now is because I talk about him so much to my wife. I want my wife to know he's real. Yeah.
I do exist. This is not a imagination.
It could be a simulation.
It could be. Theoretically a simulation.
So one of the things that you do a lot of look into, I guess, research on your own is quantum physics, right?
No, actually, I am a biologist by training.
Okay.
So I have a background in biochemistry and microbiology and a master's in toxicology and about 25 years of experience in biological sciences,
Okay.
predominantly immunology-based and cancer-based,
Interesting.
oncology-based.
Whoa.
But, there's a lot of crossover in certain areas into physics and into other areas. So predominantly cancer biology is my area, yeah.
And where'd you get your degree?
So I got my 2 degrees, one in University of London and the other one in Imperial College.
Okay.
Yeah, so what was happening was I was setting up to do a PhD, and then I got offered a position here at UCLA out on the West Coast, and I figured, that's it. Forget the PhD. I'm off to sunshine and sand.
Wow. Yeah. It's not every day you get a fighter, a biologist, oncology biologist, and a coach in the same room. So.
Yeah. You meet some interesting people doing what I do. And I was saying to Anton before, I was trying to get one of our students, Greg, a job. He was looking for a job. And I was like hooking him up with Anton and some of the same people he knew. I'm like, in what part of life could I get someone a job? What would you say? What kind of job does he do?
It's research science, so he's predominantly going to be working on various different projects in oncology.
Yeah, like I'm linking up 2 fucking scientists together. It's pretty crazy that I have that power.
Sick.
But I think what John was saying before was like, yeah, that's your background, that's your education. But when we do our lessons in the morning, I teach Anton at 6 a.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays for what seems like years now, even throughout the pandemic and everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes the conversations will go to interesting places. And one of the things that we talked about before was we talked about the 4th dimension and stuff like that. And that's not your area of education, but that's just like an interest, right? An outside interest.
It is an interest, but, at the end of the day, all of these overlap.
Yeah, it's true.
All of these sciences overlap in the end, and there's new things you can learn that impact various different areas of science, right? So whatever is derived from physics eventually trickles into biology and vice versa. So you got to understand the whole thing. You can't just be narrow-minded and just focus on biology. You need to have an understanding of what's coming down the line in physics or applied mathematics, and see if you can apply that early on in biology, because that's where things are really going to take off. Right now, a lot of the stuff now is artificial intelligence, machine learning. A lot of that has been derived from computer science and predominantly statistics and maths, but it's now being applied to biology for drug discovery, right? So you're seeing a lot of application backwards, but then you also see a lot of application forwards as well, enhancement of the brain, on various drugs, any kinds of medical devices to enhance the brain itself, could potentially derive or
Things like Neuralink?
Neuralink is one. That's Elon Musk's
Yes.
thing, right? Yeah. So, here's the thing, right? I don't want to knock Elon Musk here, but he's great as a scientist. He is a scientist, right? No doubt, he's an engineer.
For sure.
And the issue now, he's entering biology, which is a incredibly messy space, right? He entered the rocket space, right? He entered space age, right? SpaceX, which is not something he was his focus area, and he succeeded. Sure. So in reality, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but biology is a completely different area in terms of how things work. If anything goes wrong in biology, you wind up dead. And that's key, right? So if a rocket fails, it blows up, right? And that's it, right? So you could test as many rockets as you want and see massive explosions. You release something into clinical trials and into the patient population, it doesn't work, you wind up killing people, right? And you've seen a lot of that with a lot of drugs out there, And that's people have learned that, and so you have like a steady stream of scientists that understand past failures, and so he's going to be very careful entering the biology field, and there's a lot of skepticism amongst biologists when tech people get involved.
Oh yeah, I mean I can imagine.
Exactly. I mean, engineers look at things in a very engineering way. They'll look at this as a right angle, right? Whereas, in biology, yes, there's a right angle, but behind that, there's a lot of stuff happening in that right angle, right? There's blood cells going through it, there's lymphocytes, there's various other cells, and there's a dynamic flow of blood through that. There's, it could be through shear stress or any kinds of stress falling through that, falling through this. If this was like a human being, right? So there's a lot more complexity to a body than there is a system, such as a rocket or a car, for example.
Of course.
So that's where he's going to be careful.
It's crazy because we don't have enough time, man. I have so many questions from what you just said right there. And if we were doing our lesson, that's what would happen. We would just nonstop talk about it. But I think something that was also interesting is that we kind of you touched on there is one of the ways we really started getting into this together was when we were talking about during the pandemic with all the research in terms of like the cure and that type of stuff, right? So what type of things were we talking? We were talking about the vaccine, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The vaccine. So
What are your thoughts there?
So that's an interesting concept, right?
Try to hold the mic a little bit closer. Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry.
All good.
You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we obviously can't, but
we can get you, but it's just a lot more clear.
Yes. So I worked in academia and then I worked in large pharma for many years, right? So I understand the whole process, how things work. From the outset, this looks like the quickest way to develop a vaccine, right? Targeting this particular protein called a spike protein, which binds to the cells themselves. The spike protein is actually probably, let's imagine it's this big, right? But only a certain part, let's like just move this part up of it, is actually binding to the cell, but the spike protein is actually this, right? So only this part is binding. So you're creating vaccine to the entire spike protein, right? Including this part which binds. So you're only going to get so much neutralizing antibodies, right? It's going to be to this. That's what actually stops the virus from entering the cells. Problem you have with this virus, right, is that it mutates a lot, right? And so if you have a vaccine to virus version 1.0 and the virus doesn't mutate, right, you're fine. You're perfectly fine, right? But if you have a vaccine to virus version 5.0, which has gone through several iterations of mutations, how efficacious is that virus or that vaccine at that point, right?
Probably not very effective.
Exactly. And so you're going to start to see that dwindle over time, right? So in reality, it's good if you have this up front, a vaccine ready up front, and it's moved through the clinical trial system really, really quickly. To get it and hit it on the very first iteration of the virus. If it hits the second iteration, third iteration, fourth iteration, then you have problems. You have things like antibody-dependent enhancement, which is a possibility. We haven't seen that so much yet, but never in the world of science, you should never say it's never going to happen because you don't know, right?
And that would be where your immune system just doesn't respond unless it has that boost, right?
No, actually, antibody-dependent enhancement is actually works against it. So you would have antibodies against the virus. However, those antibodies are enhancing the virus's replication
rather than the virus.
Exactly, rather than eliminating.
It's fucking insane.
And that's what happens with dengue virus, and it also happened with RSV, which is a respiratory virus you see in kids, respiratory syncytial virus.
Well, funny enough, isn't dengue treated with ivermectin?
Yes, I believe so. I'm not too sure what the I believe so, right? Yeah,
I believe so as well.
There's a lot of early on in the and I could address that as well as and chloroquine as well, actually.
Yeah,
of course you can.
The early on in the pandemic, there were a lot of studies on already approved drugs and what could potentially work to stem the virus from replicating. And so there's a lot of drugs out there that could potentially do something. Chloroquine, for example, works by now. If you look at how a virus enters a cell, right? So it enters, and then it enters something called an early endosome, and then a late endosome, and then somehow it can escape from that mechanism. These are little kind of vesicles where the virus is held. It escapes from that, and because these particles, the early endosome, the late endosome, increase in acidity, and so by increasing in acidity, they actually can the virus can escape and then enter the cell and do all the dividing, right? Chloroquine actually works by reducing the acidity of those early endosomes and particularly the late endosomes. So theoretically, when you look at it, if you're impacting that kind of trafficking cycle going from early endosomes to late endosomes to lysosomes, and you're reducing the acidity environment, you could potentially impact the virus's ability to enter the cell and be able to escape the cell and activate itself. So theoretically, it makes sense, right? What you would have to do is do a few formal studies to ensure that it does work, right? We already know the safety profile of the drug. It's been out for so many decades, right?
Since the 80s, right?
Exactly. You don't need to do anything regarding the safety profile. What you need to do and what you need to understand is whether the dose that's used right now for whatever it's approved for can be the same dose that can be used for, let's say, viruses, if it is effective, right? If you're starting to increase the dose, if you start to increase it much higher and higher, you start to narrow what's called a therapeutic window, right? And what I mean by a therapeutic window is that you, at a certain concentration, you have efficacy, right? So this is at this point of concentration of the drug, low concentration of drug, you get efficacy. But if you start increasing the concentration of the drug in the body, you start to hit toxicity, right? So anything can happen with that, right? So if you drink too much water, that's actually poisonous, right? Any drug you take too much paracetamol or too much Advil, that's going to actually go from efficacious to toxicity, right? So as long as you're within a therapeutic window, that's what they call it. It's called, the actual term is therapeutic index. It's the ratio between the concentration, what they consider IC50s, the 50% concentration of toxicity to the 50% concentration of efficacy. If that window is large enough and you got some wiggle room for efficacy and no tox, then that's fine. Now we don't know what that efficacy range is, and we're not entirely clear. I mean, the clinical trials seem to be a little bit questionable.
Well, that's the problem though, is that they stopped the clinical trials in the beginning, for specifically ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
So there's the issue, right? So it's difficult to say why they did it. I mean, it's easy to say,
Political reasons.
You could say that. You could say political reasons.
Does it look like that to you?
No, it looks like all of that to me. You could say it's
just multivariate.
Reasons. Yeah. It's not only political reasons, but it's also money reasons as well. And I'll try and explain this in a way that doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory. Right?
It's like vaccines, you can charge a lot more for them instead of something that's more generic like ivermectin or
exactly. There's no money, there's no investor upside, right? So let's say you bring to the market, let's say, and I bring to market a novel drug, right? That is intellectually that is IP, intellectual property protected, right? So that means I have, let's say, 20 years protection on this drug. No one else can make it, right? No one else can make it. It's not generic. And then you bring ivermectin or you bring chloroquine to the market, right? It's not protected, right? It's already gone generic. Anyone can make it. In fact, here in Long Island, it's actually known for the most amount of generic drug makers.
Really?
Here in Long Island.
Interesting.
And so anyone can make it, including yourself, right?
It seems like for the good of people, though, you would just want to make everything generic so different people could enhance it,
Correct, but then there
Seems
wouldn't
like
be
more moral.
it's more moral, but there wouldn't be a pharma industry,
True.
right?
Well, do we really want a pharma industry? To a certain extent?
Well, the thing is, what would be the alternative, right? So there's no cure for cancer. There's no cure for Alzheimer's disease. In fact, Alzheimer's disease, everything that's been done has been a complete and utter failure. With cancer, there's a small blip in the market with the immuno-oncology drugs out there, but certainly there's no cures for a lot of the diseases out there, except for bacterial diseases, which you have antibiotics. But now you see.
But even that is there's MRSA and stuff like that, and all these drugs don't work after a while.
And what you see in the market right now is a lot of investor sentiment to not invest in new drugs for antimicrobials or antivirals or antifungals. There's a few that do, but mostly they don't. Why is that, right? It's because they're entering a generic market, right? So doxycycline, how much does that cost? Like 20 bucks, 30 bucks? Not that much, right?
Yeah, that's the standard one they give you if you get like a staph infection or something.
Exactly. So now you're going to bring in a new drug into the market, and you would have to charge premium to recoup all your losses on drug discovery and drug development. So you're probably going to charge $300, $400, $500. No one's going to want to pay that when they know that there's already a drug on the market, Doxy, right, which goes at like 30, 40 bucks.
Yeah.
And so the doctors would say, well, let's try Doxy first, see if that works. And then
go to
obviously it
this
doesn't,
expensive one.
and then we'll go to the expensive one. Really speaking, what companies want and investors want is their drug to be a first-line therapy. That means the doctor says, we're going to do this first. And that very rarely happens, right? It needs to be incredibly efficacious, and it needs to be 100% an issue where the bacteria is completely resistant. And at that point, it's too late, right? It's too late.
Yeah, then you got sepsis, and then it's over.
Exactly. So the investors look at it and think, well, the market would suggest that you're going against a generic market where everyone's charging 20 bucks for existing drugs, and you're going to charge $500 for your drug to recoup all your losses and then ensure that your investors make money. I don't know if the doctors are going to prescribe this. They're probably going to prescribe it as second or third line or fourth line therapy when they've exhausted all possibilities on the generics, and then maybe yours. So you might not even get to yours, and we might not make as much money.
But what's the problem with that, though? If people are getting the best results,
There's no problem with that except people aren't getting paid.
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Investors are not getting the money back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's the thing.
and that's not how big business works.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's the problem, is that it's become big business now. This is like, Pfizer Tower is Trump Tower now. You know what I mean? It's like
After Anton gave that monologue, I want you to splice in Nog saying something, right?
yeah, right. I want to splice him roasting Kyle Troyan
Oh, that was
in
pretty
some
funny.
way.
I'm in that bitch more than Troyan is in the girls' DMs.
Nog's podcast was good. Good job, Nog.
Yeah,
Proud of you.
very good job, Nog. Very good job.
The most interesting thing, and I don't want to leave here without talking about this.
Yes.
One of the thing I repeat to everyone, but I'm so stupid, and I can't get the words out to portray it right. Is the fourth dimension.
Okay.
That is one of the craziest things, and it actually changed how I thought about a lot of different things.
So before you start, though, I want to just make sure I have it correct. It's
Right.
where
I don't
you
think
can.
you can have it correct.
I don't think I can. Not as correct as him.
Dude, I'm
for
so
sure,
excited for this right now.
But it's where you can essentially see backwards and forwards in terms of time. Like time is the new dimension.
We got to pull up a tesseract for you to see. We have the graph.
That is technically correct if you consider the fourth dimension time. Time is a dimension, correct? Typically you call it now space-time.
Let's dumb it down. Go through 1, 2,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. What I'm talking about...
Treat everyone like they're idiots because they are.
Okay.
Especially the people who are listening to this, it's like,
All right.
it's not the most educated people.
No,
Are you calling my
Yes.
subscribers dumb?
Yes, I am.
You're
And I'm a subscriber.
You're only talking to Nog right now.
Yeah. That's funny. I don't know, Kyle listens, right? Just kidding, Kyle.
But what I mean by the fourth dimension here, or the fifth or the sixth, is spatial dimensions, not time or temporal dimensions. Okay. So let's consider what that means, right?
Spatial dimensions.
Spatial dimensions, as in
Physical planes.
physical planes, rather than temporal planes, right? So not
Temporal
time,
meaning time.
meaning time. time is one of those dimensions. So let's keep that in consideration.
So we're
here.
talking about these dimensions, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're not talking about time. We're talking about planes.
We're talking about planes.
Gotcha.
And that's how we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about planes, right? The best way to understand a fourth dimension or a fifth dimension or a sixth dimension, I believe there's 11 dimensions. One of them is time. Is to think of 2 dimensions, right? And what that means. You can't think about 3 dimensions going at fourth dimension without thinking about the second dimension. What is the second dimension? If you
Flat
would,
object.
Super Mario.
Yeah.
flat object. Imagine something that's incredibly flat. So that means it can only travel in one plane, right? It can move this way, this way, this way, this way, or any of those
Super
parts of
Nintendo
those.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if this is the plane it's on, that's all it can move in, right? It doesn't know up or down, right? If you can't even point up or down because
So
you
even
don't know.
less than Super Nintendo platformers, just going this way, not going up or down at all within that individual plane.
Oh no, it can go within that individual plane. If you consider that plane this way, it can go up, down, and this way.
Okay. Yeah, that's
If the plane is this way, it can go this way and that way, right?
Not just north, south, east, west.
Exactly. Or on coordinates, it will be X and Y, right? Those would be the coordinates, not Z, right? Z is up and down. So if you ask a 2-dimensional object, which is on one plane, what is up and down, they wouldn't be able to point, right? Because even if they point, they could only physically point in this direction, this direction, this direction, or this direction.
Okay.
Right? So they can't point up or down, right? So now what you need to do, right, is how do you create from the second dimension a third dimension?
You add.
Stack it on top of each other.
Right. So let's consider. Yeah, exactly. So let's.
We went over
consider
this. I'm not smart.
So let's consider if the second dimension was a piece of paper, like an A4 piece of paper, right? And that's where everything's living, right? And then you take about 1,000 other A4 pieces of paper and stack it on top, right? Now you've got the third dimension, right? You've got unlimited or infinite numbers of planes where this object can now travel.
And that's
right?
where we are, correct?
Yeah, we're in a third dimension, right?
We
we're
live in a
stacking-
3-dimensional world.
Exactly. So we've stacked on that second dimension multiple other second dimensions to make a third dimension, and now the thing can travel. Now, think about it from a third dimension perspective, right? To enter the fourth dimension, you need to stack multiple
Third dimensions.
dimensions on top of each
You
other.
can't even fathom it. You need to have like a visual. You need to have the graph to see it.
Yeah, I'm having a tough time understanding.
Just like a second dimension object can't point up or down, a third dimension object like ourselves can't point to the fourth dimension.
We can't even fathom
because
it.
we don't know where it is, right?
But how do we? This is the part that trips me out. How do we know it's even there? How come it's proven? If we can't physically, just like a 2-dimensional object, a 2-dimensional person doesn't understand the third dimension,
Right.
how the hell do we understand the fourth dimension? Because like fundamentally we shouldn't be able to, right? Based on what you said before.
Correct. Yeah. Theoretically, we shouldn't be able to.
Trips me out.
We'll be able to understand it or theorize it, right?
Yes.
But can we prove it or be able to define it or show it?
What about the slit experiment? Doesn't that?
The slit experiment is actually wave particle duality, which is slightly different.
So not at all.
No, that is a totally different trippy subject.
Nice.
But what we can do is theorize that there is a fourth dimension, and
Based
you can
on
go
what?
up to 10 dimension, and that's basically
On math?
on theoretical physics right now. There's no. I mean, the argument is that these other multiple dimensions, spatial dimensions, are incredibly small. So they're not like universes like this, but they're probably in smaller pockets. But
Black hole type things?
black hole is no. The black hole just goes down into singularity. Doesn't necessarily break down. May not necessarily break down dimensions. I don't think. If there is any kind of issue, there is probably going to be a temporal issue with as you start approaching faster than the speed of light, as you enter the event horizon, that's where things are going to change in terms of temporal aspects, but not, I don't think dimensionally, spatially.
I see.
But in reality is, we can't point, right, to where this dimension is, but what we can do is theorize what it would look like. If you look at 0 dimensions, well, what is 0 dimensions?
It's nothing.
It's actually a dot.
I thought that's one.
Well, one dimension is one plane going in this direction.
So it's a dot extended.
It would.
Would you call it more of a line?
It wouldn't be able to. It wouldn't be able to move anywhere, right? It wouldn't know this way or that way, right?
That's 2D.
That's just its dimension, right? The first dimension, it can only move in one direction. It doesn't even know this direction.
Okay.
Right. Now, what have we done there? We've just added a line to this dot, right, to go from 0 to 1, right? Now to get into from the first to the second dimension, what we've done is we've created another plane, right, in 90 degrees. So we've taken this plane and we've added in 90 degrees another plane to it. So now this thing can travel in this direction and then in this direction, right? And now, if we add another 90 degree plane to it, which is up and down, so now we've got this, that's 90 degrees, and then we got this, which is 90 degrees to everything else. Now we can travel in those planes, right? So theoretically, if you want to add another dimension, you've got to add a 90 degree angle to what the existing third dimension is. And you can render that on an object like a cube, right? And you can define what a 4th dimensional cube would look like.
Is it even describable in words alone, or
It's
is
got
that
to be like a
something?
video.
You can see, there is a video. A 4th dimensional object, a 4th dimensional cube is called a tesseract.
Like the Marvel movies.
Yeah. But if you look at what they've done, right, is that if you look at any videos, and this is going to be really trippy here.
It is trippy.
A 4th dimension. What you're seeing is a 4th dimensional cube rendered as a 3rd dimensional object.
Yeah.
But on a 2-dimensional screen. So you just kind of like
Wow.
You're not really defining it per se. But when you look at how a tesseract moves, and you can type in YouTube what a 4th dimensional cube looks like, and just type in tesseract 4th dimensional
Yeah, if you
cube.
type in Tesseract, it'll come up. There's like 2 pretty good videos on it.
Right, and you'll show a cube rotating, but then you'll see it rotating, and
It looks like it's like imploding on itself almost. It looks like it's expanding and contracting at the same time. It's weird.
Exactly.
We'll show you after.
Exactly. Now let's take that another step forward, right? What would happen if a cube entered a 2-dimensional plane? What would you see?
A square.
Exactly. Right.
That's so weird.
Now, what would happen if a 4th dimensional cube entered a 3 dimensions? What would you see?
Black hole. It would just compress.
Oh no, it'd be a cube. You would just see a cube, right?
Because I don't know. It just seems like everything's just gonna implode now.
No. It will just look like a cube.
I see.
But if we look at it a little bit differently, right? Let's look at it. Let's take a sphere, for example, right? If you take a 3-dimensional sphere and put it and drop it slowly into a 2-dimensional space, what would you initially see?
A half circle.
Yeah, you would see a small circle as it enters the space because it's just the tip of the sphere entering, and then it starts growing bigger into a bigger circle, and then back into a small circle, and then into a dot, right? Because it's just entered multiple planes, right? So it's gone from a small circle to a big circle when it hits the major diameter of the sphere, and then it goes through, and then it turns into a dot. Now, if a 4th dimensional sphere enters the 3rd dimension, what would that look like?
If a 4th dimensional sphere enters the 3rd dimension?
Yeah.
A sphere.
Yeah, but it will look like, initially it will look like a small sphere, growing into an incredibly large sphere, and then growing back into a small sphere again. Just like you saw with small circle going to the large circle, going into a small circle as a sphere from the 3rd dimension when it went into the 2nd dimension, right? So fourth dimensional sphere going into the third dimension, you would see a sphere go from small to large, back to small again.
Wait, can I interrupt you, Anton? Sorry. I don't know. Maybe you answered it, but how do we know it's there? What gives us the knowledge that it's there?
It's all theoretical right now.
So it's just theory.
It's theoretical.
But it's widely believed.
It's widely believed. Yes. So
and based on what is it based on?
Math.
Yeah, just
equations? Knowledge of the third between the second and third dimension.
Absolutely.
Is that what it is?
And
why does it end at 11?
I don't think they can go further than 11 in terms of the math.
Yeah.
I think one of them is definitely temporal. It's time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it ends at 10 and then plus time.
But isn't time just a construct we created?
Not necessarily.
It's now space-time.
Space-time?
Yeah, you have to use the term space-time according to Einstein, and that's in itself.
Space-time meaning like the hours in the day?
No, it's space is connected with time.
Explain.
And that's
the way that space expands.
Space expands, gotcha.
Space can expand, absolutely, but it's also connected with time in terms of how there's impact on gravity with time. How
time impacts gravity?
Gravity impacts time, I believe.
Gravity impacts time?
Yes.
Not time impacts gravity?
Time impacts gravity. I don't think it works that way.
Because as space expands, gravity changes?
No. So if you look at a black hole, for example, the
sense.
gravity is over the speed of light.
Gravity's over the speed of light?
At the event horizon, right?
I can't even fathom
so
what you just said.
At that point, you're changing time itself, right? So
how are you changing it?
That's something that's way out of my league in terms of the physics. It is an incredibly.
But people could
challenging
explain
perspective. People can explain it, but it is a challenging thing to look at, because as you go into the speed of light, you start to time starts to change for a person. Even as as they say, astronauts go around the world, their clock is going to be different than a clock of someone who's just stationary.
That's kind of where the time travel comes from, right? Like the idea of it initially comes from traveling around the globe, right? The time's changing, right?
Well, yeah, actually, it's a little bit different than that. It's actually that if you had two exact clocks, right? So down to a minute, you had a clock and I had a clock, right? And they're both calibrated perfectly so that there will be no errors. If you get on a plane and travel around the world or do other things, under higher speed, and I'm just sitting on a couch just watching TV. If we come back after you've done all your travels, there will be a slight difference in those clocks.
Really?
Even if they are perfectly synchronized, there will be a difference.
So you literally time traveled.
You actually have had an impact in terms of a temporal relationship with.
But we've talked.
Is that more an earthly error? As in, just.
He's saying it's not, right?
It's not. It's got nothing to do with the clocks themselves.
So nothing to do with maybe the fact that technology is just flawed?
No, we've talked about this a little bit before, right, Anton? And it's like in order to truly time travel, we'd have to be going faster than the speed of light or speed of
light. Yes.
Yeah, so it's impossible.
Yeah, anything going past the speed of light is impossible by
now.
Well, we would disintegrate, correct?
We would have to be either at, I think, zero mass to actually go at the speed of light itself.
Just like light, yeah.
Right? And to go faster than the speed of light is unknown, because the only things that I'm aware of that can go faster than the speed of light is when you enter the event horizon at the black hole, right? So what
Can you define event horizon for me?
Okay, so you know what a black hole looks like, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of, it's this kind of circular object where there's all of this light around here, right? And then there's a nice, perfectly defined circle, which is completely black, right? Why is there no light coming out of that black part? Because it can't come out. Because anything past there is faster than the speed of light. So what I mean is
one more time. So the light that surrounds the black hole.
Yeah. Let me explain it a different way, right? So if we want to escape the the orbit or escape the gravitational pull of the Earth, right? We need to go at a particular escape velocity, which I think we can look it up. I think it's around 11 miles per. It's something.
11 miles per second.
It might be that.
Something like that. That's crazy.
We could check. We could check what
That is pretty ridiculous.
I mean, anything that goes up in terms of rockets, you have to go incredibly fast to escape. Otherwise, you just fall back down, right? You fall back down into the Earth, and that's it, right? Or you enter an orbit at which eventually just fails, right? So to escape the Earth completely and go to the moon, right, you need to hit something called escape velocity. And escape velocity is maybe we should check this before I
Don't want to misquote.
I don't want to misquote. So let me just do. I'll type in escape velocity.
When he's looking that up, John, is this interesting to you at all? Is this just me?
Unfucking believable.
It's crazy, right? It's like Anton's changed my life for the better. I feel like so much more, I'm more aware of everything. You know, he's given me interests that I never even knew I had. You know,
It's 11.2 kilometers per second, so 6.96 miles per second, right? So you need
that's escape velocity.
Escape velocity. So that means you need to be going 6.97 miles per second, so that you don't fall back down to Earth, right? Now, that's just Earth, right? Now, if you look at a black hole, right, there's a certain point in a black hole where there's an escape velocity that's faster than the speed of light.
Okay.
Right? The speed of light is...
Wait, one more time. I have to process that.
Okay, so just imagine you're sitting on top of a black hole, right? Now, to escape from that black hole, right, you can't be going 6.9 miles per second. You need to be going at the speed of light to escape it. And anything closer to that black hole, if you go deeper into that black hole, is faster than the speed of light to escape.
So that's why light's escaping.
That's why it's called a black hole, because you can't see
light. Can't escape.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It's being sucked in, right?
I see. All right, now it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So the event horizon is the point where you are at the speed of light for escape velocity, because you can see that part of the black hole. Anything beyond that event horizon, you can't see, because it has gone beyond the speed of light. So
it simply
light
can't escape.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at a black hole, you would see a black part like this, and then light around it, right? So everything around here can escape because it's going at the speed of light. But anything inside here, or at that circular edge, is actually going at the speed of light itself to escape. But anything inside has to go faster than the speed of light, and it can't, because nothing can go faster than the speed of light.
Understood.
So it's all just sucked into a singularity, which is a infinite kind of gravitational pull into nothing.
Man,
Which is
it's pretty nuts. And
we're just sitting here in this lounge.
Yeah, we're just,
All that's happening right now.
but you know what? It really is amazing how small we really are compared to all these things. And obviously, you know, this is more of a philosophical thing rather than a
We talk
physics
about that
thing.
stuff too. We talk about that all the time. Like, what's the point? You know, like it's like the point is to enjoy yourself. You know.
I don't know. I'm a pretty religious person myself. You know, I'm a Catholic, and you know, I firmly believe that. You know, like, let's take the balance of the Earth itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if Earth goes even 1 degree off its axis, we go tumbling into space, essentially. Correct?
Yes, yeah, we could have some major issues if we go off our axis. We could wind up with some significant issues in terms of changes in the climate, changes in weather. You know, even if the poles shift, which has happened before, that could have major impact in terms of life itself. Magnetic changes going from north to south, or east to west, that there's going to be major issues in that. Yeah.
Well, you know, I know that there's obviously, you know, aspects to this where people can argue, it's just logic. That's just how the universe works, and you know. But I personally think that's God at work. You know, that it sums it up very well for me, and I know that that's a very
I hope you're right.
simplistic thing. I feel like I'm right. And
I hope you are.
Yeah. Well.
I mean, you know, at some point there is no. I mean, there's a lot of detractors in terms of God, and I think they're far too early in dismissing anything just yet, because they say that science can prove everything. Science hasn't proven everything yet, right? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot to discover. There's a lot of things that just confound physicists as well as biologists. And yes, sometimes you can argue it's an easy way out to say it's God, but you can't discount it at the same time, right? You can't.
That's the thing that I'm trying to say.
You can't discount the possibility of a creator in all of this. Now, the question is that creator created kind of a simulated world for us, or are we actually, or is it in biblical terms described as, a world?
Free will?
Yeah, free will.
That's where I fall.
If you are a creator of a video game, right, and you understand that all of the players in this video game, NPCs have a conscience and seem to be having some level of life to them, right? So you look at them and you think, well, these aren't NPCs per se, they're actually conscious. They're able to do things, right? They're able to question everything they do. So this could be considered life. And then you can see them then, killing each other. Would you want to intervene, right? As a creator, because you know that you just created this life in this video game. Would you want to intervene in that? Because you know that they're all they have the ability to think, and you want to protect their well-being.
On the game,
right?
Depends what the game is,
and it depends on the creator as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
The creator could be like, well, you know what? Let them do whatever they want. That's it. I'm just here to just monitor this video game.
Well, so here's my argument with that is that NPCs in a video game, they don't really have a conscience. It's actions like let's
but
go
who's
with
to say that?
Well, it's based on the actions that they partake in the story. Like let's say you just have like a side character. Every single event in the story triggers a certain response from that NPC or that side character, and it's not a conscious thought, because there's so many different ways that you can react to something, and it's scripted in a game, rather than right now, if you punch me in the face, I have a choice. I can hit you right back. Right. Or I can just say, or I can pull a Chris Rock and just be like, oh, wow, Anton just slapped the shit out of me.
But what if technology gets to the point where we're creating these games, and these games they're making these decisions on their own, and they're becoming self-aware, and like
well, with artificial intelligence, it probably could.
Stuff like that's happening, right? They just had to shut that computer down, right? That was answering questions, right? Did we talk about that?
Oh no, I don't think so. No,
I might be misquoting this, but they had like a computer program that they created, whoever created it, and it was going off the script, so they shut it down.
That's interesting.
Learns too much.
Yeah.
So AI, and this is what I think Elon Musk talks about a lot, is that AI could, there's nothing that could differentiate between a fully developed AI character or a model or whatever you want to create, like say a robot, and a human. Is there anything that's inherently conscious driven that AI can't recreate itself?
In technical terms, no, but emotionally, well, yeah, no.
Yeah,
I see. I see what you're saying.
It's a crazy thought, man. It hurts to think about.
Actually, no, I do actually see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's challenging, because you could say
it's your ego that wants to say but it's completely possible.
Yeah.
Right. If you say love, hate, worship, anything like that, these are all biochemical mechanisms that are actually happening in your brain to instruct that. Those can be recreated. Right?
This is science.
Yeah, this is biology. Science. You can actually recreate those pathways very simply, right? And you can layer that on top of AI, so they control those pathways, right? So that they can decide that this pathway is the way to go rather than this pathway, depending on the circumstance. So is there going to be any difference? And it's very challenging to make a counter argument to that.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with it.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's tough when you get someone who's so much smarter than you in front of you, and,
Oh my
and
God.
they're saying these points, man.
Well, dude, when I had Nog on the, how do you think I felt having Nog on the podcast?
Yeah, he's
man?
pretty smart now.
That's what I'm saying. But so do you think? Well, so here's where my argument with emotion comes in. You know, I believe that thoughts are a product of the soul. You know, like actually, I was just having a conversation the other day, and it's actually the podcast that I just put out today. Joe Boca, go check it out.
What's up, Joe Boca?
But we were talking about the extension of ourselves as a soul, and then our physical selves, and how if you cut open a brain, you can't see thoughts.
no.
But when you're alive and you're conscious, you see things, you hear things, you smell things. You know, I can smell a croissant right now without having to have a croissant in front of me. You know, where does that come from?
Oh, he's got him going.
Okay, that's challenging, but the reality is, all of those are boiled down into biochemical processes in the brain.
It hurts,
right?
dude.
Because everything you see is interpreted by the brain, not by the eyes. It's interpreted by the brain, and the brain is not the soul, right? The brain is a function of the cells within it firing and then processing anything that's coming in as an input, or even as a thought, right? Even as a concept, it's coming in. It's probably the most complex computer you can have.
Of course.
Right now. So in reality, if you look at a cell and how it functions down to the being as being a set of biochemical pathways and electrons and protons moving around, right? So atomic, subatomic particles, however you want to look at it, creating various different pathways to give you the feeling of what you are, right? So in theory, you can recreate that in itself, right? In a brain. Not tomorrow, maybe 100 years, 1,000 years, maybe 5,000 years from now.
Quantum computing and all that.
Quantum computing can take you there. Certainly now you'll extend the ability to create create a more powerful computer with quantum computing. Right now they can't, because I think it's very, very challenging to get to that stage. But once they've got to that stage and things are looked at as ones and zeros rather than ones or zeros, you're now working with a very, very, very powerful processor, incredibly powerful, on the level of a brain. And
That's when it's going to get tricky.
that's when, if a robot was to tell you, with a quantum brain was to tell you, I can smell a croissant, but it's not there, are you going to think, well, that they're just saying that because they learnt it somewhere? Or
Yes.
are they actually physically, is there some process that's been developed and they developed a consciousness?
And how would you even
Well-
measure that? How
Right.
would at that point, you can't measure that.
Well, I think we would have to look into the processes as to how it would be able to develop a sense of smell in general. There would have to be some sort of system integrated into that robot or computer or whatever,
Yep.
where it can detect certain types of smells, like a smoke alarm detects smoke. So it would still be a program. It wouldn't be a conscious. I don't think that there is anything besides a human being or an animal, technically. Because I do think that animals have conscious, obviously, because a gazelle knows to run. But there would have to be some sort of program involved in detecting that sort of smell, the compounds, that like the sugars, whatever is given off when it comes out of the oven, or even just dough, the yeast.
Correct. But then the counter is that is a process that's also in the humans, right? That process of detecting that smell as it hits the olfactory nerves and then enters the brain and then triggers that memory of well, that's what that smell is and that's what it is essentially a circuit, right? Which you can theoretically recreate in a robot and would not look any different. So where would consciousness come into that aspect? So if you think of consciousness and soul, you're thinking of an additional layer, right? On top of
Yes.
just basic equations, basic biochemical pathways, basic subatomic or atomic particles moving around, right? There's something else on top of that.
100%.
But defining that something else that can't be recreated in artificial intelligence is challenging, because you would have to define what that extra thing is, right? It's not emotions, because that's all been that can be recreated. What is it? I mean,
Well, can genuine emotion be recreated in a computer setting?
No, at this point, no, right? But in reality, if you start to move into deeper processing powers, you could potentially do that, right? Because genuine emotions of anger and of love, I mean, these are coming from, inputs and then outputs from the brain that are releasing hormones that are then having that impact on the brain, having a feedback loop on the brain or on the body itself, right, to do things. Sure. So that is, again, a circuit, right? And so that can be created. Now, again, would you argue that that's consciousness? I wouldn't argue that that would be consciousness, because you're thinking of it as an extra hidden layer on top of that, which is undefined at this point, right? But what would constitute that? Let's say if we make a perfect robot that can do all of the things that a human body can do, is there anything in that robot that would not enable it to have consciousness? What is that extra layer it's missing? Can you define what that is?
On an earthly level, no.
Right. Okay.
But then you would go into the realm of what is that, like human beings, we have the soul, and that's what we would define as our conscious. But then you have input from a computer, and that would be its higher power technically. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
And its soul is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but then its input, it will still be going through processing of moving of electrons, decision making, whether if it's a traditional computer, ones and zeros, or if it's a quantum computer, ones and zeros at the same time.
How would it be able to process morality, though?
Morality, how would it define morality?
Well, what makes you feel good? Well, what makes humans feel good over the past however many years of evolution? A hug.
Okay, so in terms of what's defined as good versus evil, and how to approach life or how to approach other people. But
I guess my genuine question would be, how would it be able to process? So let's say you feed it the definition of good morals as we have it now, and then you feed it the definition of bad morals as we have it now. Would it just be going off that definition, or would it be going off the genuine emotion that is felt when a good thing happens to you?
Well, the way it happens now, right? So it works on training sets, right? So it'll have multiple data inputs, and it would find the best cluster to actually move toward, and that will be the response, right? And so the argument is that what's happening with humans, right? So the response would be this, and this, and well, the input is this. Like, let's say someone slaps you, and then the response is, do we go this way in terms of slap them back, or do we go this way in terms of turn the other cheek, right? So how that's defined would be through the entire environment itself, right? Where they are and what they're doing, and all of that would be plotted on a graph, right? Let's say you're in a spot where it's just you, that would be plotted on a spot where maybe I shouldn't do anything, or I'm in a spot where I'm with my family and this could be dangerous. It'll be now plotted on a spot where I may need to defend myself, right? And then if you look at what else is happening in there, let's say, is this going to impact if I get in a fight, is this going to impact my job? Is this going to impact anything else? You plot that on there. So if it impacts your job, then you plot it as a negative. If it doesn't impact your job, you'll plot it as a positive. So you go through these multiple calculations pretty quickly, right, in the human brain, to define whether you're going to do something about it or do nothing about it, right? And That's
It's almost like the
essentially-
process of growing up, but just in terms,
Exactly.
It's just data input.
It's data input, and it's been plotted, and then where the most dots lie is your decision, right? To actually move toward that decision. So that's probably and that's kind of how AI works right now, right? Or ML works right now. It moves through statistics and in terms of
ML meaning machine learning.
machine learning. Yeah. So they go hand in hand. There's a slight difference, but ML is more towards data plots and learning from training data sets which way to move towards, and that's what I'm kind of going towards is this ML part. But essentially, that's how a robot would do it, right? And that's theoretically how a human would do it as well, right? I mean, then when they're confronted by something, there's multiple factors and thoughts that are going through their head as to what they should do next, right? And that's plotted on a graph as to negatives and the positives, and then they react. And the more trained people will react faster because they'll have a better way to plot these things, right? Other people might just freak out and not be able to plot it properly. But that's the response you get, right? So it's the same with AI or ML with a robot. So in terms of morality, my question then would be, why wouldn't that data plots be sufficient enough to infer morality to a robot? Because it's kind of what's happening with a human as well.
I understand that, and I see exactly what you're saying.
Good.
No, what are your thoughts?
So you're speaking from. It's interesting to me because you're speaking from. These are the data. This is like it's the same, and you're speaking from like emotions and your in how you feel, But who's to say who's right and who's wrong? It's
Exactly.
subjective.
Again, it's like science can never.
Well,
say
he is
anything
right because
100%.
the data itself is objective.
But you're not wrong either, though. Like it's
in
like,
a way.
Yeah, it's neither's wrong or right.
Exactly,
It just is.
and the reality is science can never say one thing for sure until they've proven it, and
Yeah.
they haven't proven it, right?
Of course.
So you can't say for sure right now that this is the way it is.
But history tells us that science will probably prove it eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to extrapolate with graphs because things go always wrong when
Yeah.
you extrapolate. But if you extrapolate, it does suggest that things. You could give what would be considered a robot a conscience.
Yeah.
So,
Or at least an artificial conscience.
an artificial conscience,
From what
whatever.
Anton would describe as a conscious.
Yeah, so what I would describe again, it's like every good scientist should say with that could be 100% wrong because it's not been proven, right? But the way things are moving, it would suggest that it could, right? So unless you reach some kind of barrier where you can't actually break through and you can't reach that level of perceived morality or perceived conscience, we don't know.
And I got to go through the rest of my day after hearing that. It's crazy,
Well, it's a
man.
beautiful thing though, because
it changes my day. It really does. It makes me. It changes my perspective, and for me, it makes me live better. It makes me live fuller. It makes me live more.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I hear him talk like that, I want to man. I feel like I have a understanding. I feel like I got a little bit of a cheat code. You know what I mean? I feel better. I think it would discomfort some people, but it comforts me for some reason.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can see how it discomforts people because now you're thinking, well, if we have artificial intelligence to that level, what's the point of humans?
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's the thing is that they would eventually at a certain point subjugate us.
Exactly, because they'll be thinking faster, right?
And the bank of data, it's so much larger than the human brain could even process.
But is that the next? Is that evolution?
No, because that's not a human being.
Is it?
No.
It's technological evolution, right?
Yes.
But
That's
do
been
we
created
fuse with
by-
them?
It's either we fuse with them
Because
or
we
they
kind of
destroy
are
us.
fused with them right now.
Yeah, our phones are becoming
Yeah,
an extension
it's
of
getting
ourselves.
closer. The watch,
The Apple Watch, yep.
Yep, it's in your eye. You got it in your ears now. Like
Oh, yeah.
it's getting closer.
And I feel like But I feel like that kind of stuff is dangerous. And you as an oncologist, are you an oncologist in practice?
Yes.
Okay.
Not an oncologist, the oncology researcher.
Okay, all right.
So oncologist would be the MD part. I'm the actual scientist.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He's the smarter one.
So how do you feel?
I don't know. Well, again.
How do you feel about, like there's a big thing right now with AirPods and wireless earbuds in your ears and EMF radiation to your brain?
Yeah, so that's a big one, right? So EMF
I mean, that's becoming a
radiation,
huge debate now.
and me having this phone this close to my
Yep.
groin
that?
is not a good idea.
I mean, especially with the way that we see infertility rates going down in men and women and where we have our phones.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, is correlation causation there?
It's purely epidemiology.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things that are happening in the world that could potentially create that. A lot of toxins that could be creating that.
Microplastics.
Exactly. That's
Air
one.
travel,
Air travel, in terms of
cancer, right? Like that's like a big thing on Long Island.
What do you mean?
Like the
you mean
pollution
air-
from the
pollution.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. The pollution, any kind of toxins would actually impact the world much more, right? So, particularly humans. In reality, and how I was trained as a toxicologist in my early days was that the majority of cancers out there have been caused by a lot of external influences. So the environment, rather than the genetics. Now, there's a small population of people that are genetically predisposed to cancer, right? So even if you just lock them away and put them in a pure environment, they will develop cancer, right? Because that's just a genetic predisposition. And everyone else is getting cancer because of other things, right?
Well, is it 100% a predisposition, or is it something
You
that
said
could
for
be
like a small population.
A small population, it is defined
100%.
as it's almost 100% for them.
Okay.
Right. So certain genes for breast cancer, certain genes for colorectal cancer, family history for colorectal cancer, even diabetes, heart disease, certain genes will push you in one direction versus another. Right. Even atopic dermatitis. Or skin disorders, filigrin, which is a protein, dysfunction in that protein would reduce the skin barrier or barrier function of the skin, causing staph infections and creating rashes. And,
so it'd be more susceptible to ingesting toxins through your skin?
So he's saying like getting staph infections and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, staph is already around.
Yeah,
us,
it's in your nose. It's in your
So it will just be part of your micro.
You get lesions and stuff like that.
Exactly.
More. Yeah, you'd be more prone to it.
Yeah, but really speaking, what happens there is that because of the barrier function is lost, that there's a response, right? And the response is bacterial on one end, and then also a dysregulated immune system on the other. And one of the proteins, filigrin, which can be mutated quite heavily in certain populations, they would have be more prone to atopic dermatitis, right? Same with cancer, same with diabetes, same with heart disease, right? But you could be a dude not having any issues with any of those genes and eat McDonald's for like 20 years, and you will get diabetes.
100%.
Me, right? and so you could have the best genes in the world, right? But you will get diabetes because you're eating like very bad toxins, right? And so that's what we see the majority of, right? Is the majority of it can be prevented. It's preventable, but people are not doing those things to prevent it, right? So if you were to do a screen of yourself and find what genes are essentially the issues for you, you could go about preventing that. Ensuring there's a dumbing down of the environmental initiators of exacerbating that disease, right? So you can do that, absolutely. And I think a lot of the issues we have right now with public health is that there's a lot more reactive than proactive approaches towards healthcare, especially and you've seen it with the pandemic, right? Who are the most prone? Obese, heart disease, diabetes 2, right? Not diabetes 1. Diabetes 1, yes, obviously, but diabetes 2 is
far more prevalent.
Is far more prevalent, and why is that? Because of the diet, right? I mean, the diet is causing diabetes too. I mean, if you look at the added sugars in Coca-Cola, right? Look at the grams of added sugar in Coca-Cola, right?
I think it's like 36, right?
Right, and measure
In
out.
what, a 8-ounce can? Like, yeah.
Or 12-ounce can.
12-ounce can.
It's 36.
I believe so.
Okay, so go
look that
to
up.
I think it's higher.
go to Walmart or to Target, buy granulated sugar and measure out 36 grams.
Yeah, you see
And
those
then
things on
look
Instagram. They're in the baggies, like next to all those sugars. Yeah.
And that's quite a lot of sugar.
Yeah, take it straight up, you know. So,
Right. And that's not good for you, right? I mean,
37 grams of added
Oh,
sugar.
good.
Jesus Christ.
Good job, John.
that's not good, right?
That's terrible.
Right, and that's what's causing all the resistance to insulin and all of that stuff. I mean, you're just taking too much of this.
Yeah, people. You know what's so funny? I see nowadays. You know, I've been trying to get my nutrition certification, so I've been looking into, certain programs, and I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos. And there's this one lady. She's like this typical like California vegan lady, and she was like, "Don't eat fruit. Fruit makes you fat," but she doesn't realize the way that fructose from fruit and from honey per se are processed differently in your body.
Yes, yeah, and there's a difference between empty calories and real calories as well. Right? So with fruit, there's a lot of additional nutrients you're getting from that, plus the glucose and the fructose. Right, drinking a Coke, right, you're not getting those additional nutrients.
Nope.
It's empty calories, right? So you're just getting a dose of sugar.
You're getting bloating and osteoporosis.
Absolutely, yeah.
And diabetes.
and diabetes. You're absolutely getting all of those. So,
But I see you drinking some. Are you the one who drinks Rain and Bang?
No, I have. I drink the C4s.
Even worse.
I drink those, but recently I've been trying to get away from them. Trying to drink a lot of the Kavita. I need something to satisfy my, the carbonation. So I've been drinking the Kavitas, the probiotics.
Oh, yeah.
But even those, they have 16 grams of sugar, and I don't even know how big the bottle is. But I want more than one. I want 2 or 3, and that's not good for you either.
You should soda stream some milk, man.
What's that?
Use the soda stream and make milk with it. Carbonated milk.
It doesn't sound good to me.
That sounds pretty terrible, right?
Yeah.
that's interesting. Carbonated milk. I never.
I don't know.
I'm surprised it's not.
I want to
a
see
thing.
if that's ever been done.
Definitely. If you could think of it, it's been done.
Oh, true.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer I could hang out now. I got a baby.
True.
Yeah.
But
Anything you guys have left to say?
no, I'm sorry I didn't speak a lot. I know he's way more interesting than me, and it makes me. I'll come on another time and talk about MMA and jiu-jitsu and all that good stuff.
For sure.
But
This was a great conversation, though. I mean,
yeah, dude. I mean,
I'm educated.
Me
now.
and him will carry it on, by ourselves. But but if the people want him, you could get him back without me if that's better, whatever.
For sure.
Happy to talk about cancer biology and where it stands right now and why we're having so many failures, and Alzheimer's disease, why we're having so many failures. The reality is, it's a lot more of a human issue, an arrogance issue on certain things.
That's like one last thing before we go, because I know this is kind of important to you, but that's like a passion for you, right? Like the Alzheimer disease, like the Alzheimer research and stuff like that.
Alzheimer's and oncology are a passion for me. One, because there's no cure for Alzheimer's, absolutely no cure. No one even understands the process. They say it's beta tau tangles or amyloid plaques are the mechanism of action, but when they remove that, you still get Alzheimer's. So there's issues around what's really causing Alzheimer's, right? And with oncology, because it's a truly heterogeneous disease, which means it's not just one cell that's causing it, there's multiple cells that are causing it with multiple different mutations, and they're your own cells. It's very hard to target that, right? And so you have to think about, you got to think outside of the box. Everything we have right now is a single agent, right? Single drug that you take, chemotherapy, right? That you take to kill cells. Yes, it does work, and sometimes you can get miracles where it can actually cause complete remission in certain aggressive tumors. But the reality is you're taking one drug, right, that targets one particular mechanism of action into a disease that has multiple mechanisms of action that will eventually overcome that drug and create resistance to that drug and overgrow. So that in itself is like a 3-hour thing.
Yeah,
we don't have enough time for that.
So as well, I'm tackling right now.
Well, I appreciate you for coming on and at least describing in depth as much as you could. You know, the fourth dimension and certain biological concepts and artificial intelligence. You know, these are concepts that people are very interested in hearing about, and you had a lot to say, so I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate it, Anton.
I've never actually been in this
part of the gym, right? Yeah.
Right.
People don't know
it's
it
always
exists.
just in the cage.
So we'll continue on Tuesday. Everyone else could wait, you know.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen,
All right, thanks, John.
very, very much.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff, guys.
All right.
Seriously. That was awesome.
Is that not interesting, though?